You said my name so nicely. Sorry, Azri. All right, let's move on to what's going to again be on the top of the diary here today and for the foreseeable future. The Mokgoro Inquiry. It'll be looking into the National Prosecuting Authority advocates Nomgcoba Jiba and Mrwebi's fitness to hold office. It starts in Pretoria today. President Cyril Ramaphosa suspended Jiba and Mrwebi last October as the pair is accused of impropriety in their handling of controversial cases. The president appointed the retired Constitutional Court Justice Yvonne Mokgoro to chair the inquiry and to make recommendations. So joining us in studio this morning, we've got Bongiwe Gambu, who is the spokesperson for the Mokgoro Inquiry. It's so good to have you in studio. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
So the NPA is in the process of restoring the public's faith in them. We've seen this happen. There's a new head that's coming in. This inquiry, how would you imagine going forward it's going to affect the image of the NPA?
It is going to affect it in a couple of ways. It is going to bring to the spotlight the responsibility of the leaders that we put in such an organization. It is also going to educate the ordinary person on the street about the importance of such an organization, especially in the legislative framework, as well as issues relating to the law. And third and most importantly, it is going to restore the National Prosecuting Act 32 of 1998, in a sense that now that we are saying, are these people fit to hold these offices, then now that we are having another one coming in, people will still start asking questions that, is this person still fit? Am I still on the right track? Should I be asking more questions, and should they be held accountable for their actions?
Yeah, I mean, the more you look at it, the more we are seeing allegations leveled against the NPA, even now, very much so at the state capture inquiry, and that's something that I can imagine is also, will you be using some of what's been given at the state capture inquiry, or is it all sort of, that's the state capture inquiry, this is a separate inquiry, and the different commissions work very, very separately?
They work very separately, but we are watching that commission of inquiry very closely, as well as the fact that the Constitutional Court will be sitting on the 14th of February, and they will be making a judgment into a case that was brought about whether these two should still be kept as advocates. So we are looking at anything that relates to them as advocates, and then we are also looking, of course, at their fitness to hold such offices. However, what is also very good about our inquiry is the fact that our terms of reference do not say, okay, so here's your list, focus on your list, beeline on your list, and that's it. We don't do that. We are expecting that we will get new evidence that will be coming out of these two processes that I've mentioned before.
All right. I want to just quiz you on the inquiry, as it is stipulated, is expected to be established in terms of Section 12.6 of the National Prosecuting Authority Act. What does this mean?
What it means is that the National Prosecuting Authority Act 32 of 1998, of course, stipulates certain requirements of someone in that position. And it speaks to being honest, doing things legally, as well as without prejudice. And that is the basis, really. When we had the Board of Inquiry into the fitness of the former Commissioner Bedicele, we did not have such a legislation governing us. But because these two are operating as leaders, or before they were suspended, as leaders of the National Prosecuting Authority, then that becomes the basis of our inquiry. Okay. And then, of course, also the Constitution, because people of their stature as well as their responsibility have certain responsibilities as far as the Constitution is concerned.
Now, there's obviously been room for people to make legal and written submissions to come before the Commission. How did the process go with submissions? How many are we looking at so far?
We have received in excess of 8 submissions, and of course these come from your civic organizations as well as ordinary members of the public, which we are very excited about, because this means that the person on the street who is most affected by this organization has taken it upon themselves to be part of such a process.
Yeah. Obviously, this is something that once the commission gets underway, you'll probably see more submissions.
Yes.
Is that how it works? And how long are you expected to sit for?
We are expected to sit for, today's the 21st, and we are looking at our last day of sitting, the 21st of February.
Okay.
Because at a certain point in time, we need to now shut down, start preparing the report, and then submit it between the 6th and the 9th of March.
All right. But as it stands, that if people want to submit once this a commission gets underway,
they may do so.
They may do so.
Yes.
How will the process work? Will, once the Mokgoro Inquiry has done done the commission's work, everything has been done, can they recommend criminal charges if there's enough evidence against the two?
That is the difference between our process and the Zondo Commission. That one is an inquiry, a commission of inquiry, which is, of course, run by the Deputy Justice Zondo. However, ours is just an inquiry, and that means we are looking at their fitness. We are not putting punitive measures such as recommending that so-and-so take up a seat in maximum prison or something as punitive as that. However, we will then answer all those questions relating to the terms of reference through this process by saying that this person is fit to be a leader or is fit to be an employee of the National Prosecuting Authority, however, not in a leadership position.
Okay, so that is all that the Commission can actually rule on.
That is all.
Their fitness to hold these positions, that's it.
That's why it's an inquiry, not a commission.
That's an inquiry and a commission. So that's the difference between the two of them. And if it needs to be taken further, it then obviously needs to go into a criminal investigation,
process.
into a court of law, something like that.
So what would then happen is that once our report is done, the President will sit and apply his mind to it, and based on what the Constitution says, and the Constitution is very clear about the suspension of someone like that, that it cannot be longer than 6 months. That's why our terms of reference also speak to 4 months, so that we adhere to that 6 months, so that he can then make that decision. And based on those recommendations, he may then say, okay, I will then start taking the following steps out of that report.
I suppose one has to ask the question, and I ask it on behalf of South Africans. We're sitting and we're looking at all of these inquiries taking place, whether we now, I mean, we're going to be having 3 separate inquiries taking place at the same time.
The PIC Commission as well.
The PIC, which we'll talk about in the next hour, the state capture, and now this one. What's the point when it is then just a recommendation that comes out of it, and then the president will apply his mind, and then it'll move on to something else, and then maybe something else? It's costing the taxpayers money, and yet at the end of the day, nothing really no action can be taken against anybody that's being investigated.
Quite to the contrary, we have, as ordinary people, a huge responsibility to, one, follow, especially this one, very closely, just like we did with the Life Estimani Commission, because the recommendations remain recommendations until we demand action, until we say, now that you have done this report, which we had to pay for as taxpayers, now we demand the following actions that are, of course, stipulated in those reports. However, in a commission, it's different, because then there has to be action that follows those recommendations coming out of that commission. So it is a huge task on us as a republic, as a nation, as citizens, as individuals, to safeguard our constitutional democracy and to safeguard these very important institutions by doing our part and making sure that those recommendations are indeed implemented.
All right, let's have a look at the respective advocates that are going to be investigated. Some of the controversial cases that they were involved in, Jiba and Mrwebi, what are we looking at? What are the allegations against them?
Goodness, Advocate Nomgcoba Jiba has a long list of them, and these would include cases that were brought against her by Freedom Under Law as well as KSAC, and of course one of those cases is at the Constitutional Court to be heard very soon. And then with the Special Director of Public Prosecutions, Lawrence Tembiso Mrwebi, it's also about whether he exercised his duties without fear or favor, especially relating to certain people such as your Richard Mdluli.
Yeah. All right. So those are just some of them.
Yes.
There's a lot more.
Yes,
They've
it's
also
quite exhaustive.
They also were requested by the president to submit reasons as to why they shouldn't be suspended. Obviously, that's been received. Have you seen those? Have you?
Not.
Do you know the reasons?
Not.
No.
Yes.
Is that not public knowledge? Is it not able to be knowledge before the commission?
I would imagine that the three panelists headed by Justice Mokgoro, as well as supported by Ms. Tenjiwe Vilagazi and Advocate Khomotso Moroka, Senior Counsel, would have had that process, because at certain levels you would need to get certain information. However, I do not have that information, unfortunately.
All right. Talk to us a little bit more, because we're going to be getting more and more familiar with her as this month gets underway and the commission goes. But President Ramaphosa chose Justice Yvonne Mokgoro to
Yes.
chair the inquiry. Why? Why her specifically?
I wish I knew. When I did meet her, however, I got the sense that this is someone who is very fair. And I got that sense just from the first meeting, even with her panelists, that these are people who understand fully the implications of the work that they'll be doing, the enormity of the work that they'll be doing, but most importantly, the impact of the report and the decisions and the recommendations that they would be making on ordinary people's lives, but most importantly, these two advocates that are being brought to question and account for their actions.
Okay, so we're going to, as we said, learn more about her as the time goes by. The president also has stipulated that he wants the inquiry to probe whether Jiba respected court processes and proceedings as a senior member of the National Prosecuting Authority. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
So what is going to happen is that we, as part of the process, have gone into those court records. And those court records and those cases cannot be re-examined because the law does not allow. However, we are now going to look at those specific list of cases to see how and whether or not, as you ask, she exercised her due responsibilities as is required by the National Prosecuting Act.
Yeah. In what way? I mean, how can they handle these cases inappropriately? What would be an example of that?
Goodness, I wish I were a prosecutor.
I know
Yes.
I'm throwing you a lot here, even before it has started.
I wish I were a prosecutor, but they have very specific, clear guidelines on how to deal and handle cases.
Yeah.
And they have probably a checklist, but also a code of conduct that they must adhere to, which is why it is so important that a legislation as the National Prosecuting Act of 32 of 1998 is known off by heart by people like them, because it is that one legislation that governs the way that they work first and foremost. So if you fall outside the perimeters of such a legislation, then people need to start asking questions.
All right, so just to wrap it up, we know that this is sitting until the 21st of February. The recommendations are then handed over to the president by the deadline, the 9th of March, is that correct?
Yes.
And then it is up to the president to do as he wishes with the findings.
He also has his own timeline because of the 6 months that is stipulated by the Constitutional Court.
I got a feeling this is not the last time we're going to be talking, and we thank you so much for talking to us here this morning on Morning Live.
Thank you.
This is the commission that is going to, of course, be starting today. Bongiwe Gambu, who is the spokesperson for, it's not a commission, it's an inquiry,
Yes.
the Mokgoro Inquiry. There's a difference between the two of them, talking to us about those hearings that start in Pretoria today. All right, we take a break here on the program.